Yeah, I'm not hiding.
Welcome. Is that too loud, Roy? Okay. We appreciate you being here tonight, and I don't think we need a microphone, but I'm going to use it because we do videotape these so that we can put them onto our website so that our families that are not able to be here tonight can access it at a later time, or if you are here, want to go back and look at the information, you're able to do so. So first, thank you very much for being here tonight. I think one thing, when we started holding these community forums, and I just realized I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Amy Lawrence, and I'm the Director of Counseling for Denton ISD. But when we first started having the idea about hosting these community forums, it was all about gathering information. And that's what tonight's going to be about, because when we are informed, we're better able to parent, we're better able to make the decisions we need to make, and so that's an important piece. And we're very fortunate that we have 5 people from our community who very graciously gave up their time to come and be with us tonight and tell their stories. And each one of them is going to hit on a little bit different point. And as we go, I'll introduce them. So without any further delay, our first guest that's going to speak tonight is Ryan Leak. Ryan grew up in Flower Mound, Texas, and he is 20 years old. He went to Marcus High School and graduated early. He then attended community college at NCTC. It was then that he became severely involved in drugs and his addiction, almost losing everything. Once he realized that his life was out of control, he chose to go to rehab. He has been in recovery since March 2015 and currently lives in sober living in Irving. He now spends time sharing his story, giving hope and recovery to others, and making a difference where he can. So each of our panelists are going to speak for a moment, and then we'll give you the opportunity to ask questions. You can write them down on the note card that's in your chair, and someone will come along and collect those so they can be anonymous if you'd like. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ryan to tell us his story.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, everyone, and thank you for letting me be here. 7 months ago, if you were to tell me that I'd be up here talking to people about my life and addiction and spreading awareness, I would have told you you're crazy and I'm never going to do that, and that's just not me. But that's how my life has changed dramatically. And so I guess I'll just tell a little about my story. And I was born in Louisville, and we moved over to Flower Mound when I was about 8, and I lived in a good home. I had great parents. I have one older brother, and I pretty much had everything. Growing up, I had all the toys. I had the Game Boy, television. We had fun. I had everything. And coming into middle school, I started having medical problems. I was really short. I had short stature, I guess. And I had like a weight problem, and it was around that time, 5th grade, I was real popular and everything. I had all the 5th grade girlfriends and stuff, and then going into middle school, everyone's starting to hit puberty and mature a little bit, and that's when I started to have problems. So, I went from having everything, a good family, and I have all these toys, and I'm getting good grades in school, but suddenly I have a problem with myself, and I don't know how to describe that in middle school. It's not my parents' problem or anything, but, during that time, I was taught, don't speak, don't ask for help. I wasn't able to talk to my parents about how I was feeling. I didn't know how I was feeling, what does it mean in middle school to have a problem with being alive, So I wasn't able to talk about that with them. And so, I'm dealing with this stuff and I'm dealing with these issues and trying to make it look like on the outside that I have everything. I'm still getting the good grades. I thought if I just keep making those good grades and then if I keep doing what I'm told and don't ask questions, then everything will get better. And so that pretty much carried on all the way through middle school. And then freshman year of high school, I kind of grew in height a little bit. I started losing a little bit of weight, and I still have this huge problem. I'm a paranoid, nervous freak. Basically, that's what I thought of myself, and I just saw everyone else, and I looked at myself, and I had all this stuff. I had all the toys, and I had all the good grades, and I had all of these things going for me, and I'm a wreck. I hate what I'm doing. I'm not comfortable. I'm not happy, and I see everyone else, and they don't even have what I have, and they're totally going through their life, and they're happy, and I'm jealous. I see everyone else, and it's making me unhappy with myself. And so I eventually met someone who, I started to weasel my way into what I thought was the cool kids, the kids that are not doing what they're supposed to. See, I'm the guy getting the good grades and going to do what I'm supposed to, so maybe these guys that aren't doing what they're supposed to, maybe I'll, click up with them and I'll be happy. So then it just goes downhill from there. I started smoking marijuana at 15, I believe. That's when I first tried it. And, immediately it was like, whoa, I don't have to think about my problems anymore. I don't hate myself anymore. I feel like I finally belong with people. And, it was great. I didn't think about anything. I finally found a group of people that understood me, I guess. That's what it felt like at the time. And so within just a year or so, I was a drug fanatic, I suppose. I wanted to try everything there was, everything, if you could get me whatever it is, let me have it. And so for the next 2 years, slowly my grades start going downhill. Slowly I'm getting even more distant from my family. I don't want to talk to them anymore. They don't understand me. And I got really into my addiction. And I actually eventually had a scholarship to go to UTA. And this is at the end of my senior year. And I was going to go there for college. But I decided to graduate early and move out because, I don't want to stay at home. I don't want to have anything to do with my parents. And so I got an apartment with my using buddies, and I eventually got really into heroin. And so for the next year or so, I'm trying to go to community college. I went from a straight A kid to can't even attend his classes, failing college algebra. I can't keep a job. I used to have a lot of money. I was good at saving money, and suddenly I can't keep a job. All my money's constantly gone. I still have to ask my parents to help me pay rent and stuff, and I'm constantly lying about everything I'm doing and manipulating anything to get what I need. And so I had to drop out of community college and ended up living by myself in an apartment, and I was just IVing heroin every day, and my life was miserable. All the using friends that I thought were cool and who were going to make me happy, suddenly my life was lonely. I didn't have anyone, I knew so many people, but I realized today and then that I never actually knew them, and they've never known me, and I just made my problem way worse by doing that. But the drugs were the only thing that temporarily, it was a party at first, but temporarily made me forget about all that. And so I eventually lost my job, and my parents took my car away because luckily they found out that that's what they should have done a while ago. But I lost my car, and I lost my job, and I didn't have any more money. And so I said I'd go to rehab finally for the first time, and that was on March 4th of this year. So I went to Karen, Texas, and I've been sober since March 4th of this year. And thank you. And then after rehab, I moved into a sober living home in Irving, and that's where I've been for the past 6 months. Life's a lot different now. I have 2 roommates, and I've known them for 4 months now, and I feel like I know them more than I've ever known anyone in my life. These people I've grown up with for years. I never really knew them, and I feel like I'm finally understood now, and I'm happy with myself, and I have a higher power that guides me in what I'm supposed to do, and I don't have to worry about fending for myself anymore. And so that's why I come to other meetings, I do presentations for people, I go to rehabs, and I try to spread this message of hope and just give my experience to know that there's a way out, and that's why I'm here tonight. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, for sharing your story. I'm going to stand right here for just a minute so I don't make it squeak. Thank you, really. All right, our next speaker is Olivia Waddell. Olivia is the clinical manager and supervisor of residential services at Phoenix House. She has a master's of education in counseling from TCU. Currently, Olivia is a PhD candidate in counseling and counselor education. I'm gonna try over here. And as well into the dissertation process at TCU. Additionally, Olivia has 8 years of clinical experience in case management, program management, and supervision, and direct counseling services. She is trained in positive psychology and solution-focused therapy approaches. All of her previous clinical work experience was in nonprofit settings involving youth and families in crisis in some capacity.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. As she had introduced, I am at Phoenix House, which is not far from here in Dallas, Texas. If you are familiar with the hospital district, we are literally right down the street from Parkland Hospital. We are a residential treatment facility for teenagers. We serve ages 13 through 17. Occasionally we will have an 18-year-old, depending on if they have a birthday, while they're in treatment, but it is typically 13 to 17-year-olds. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is just the trends that we're seeing in drug use among the demographic that we serve, 13 to 17-year-olds. So what I thought I would do, our average length of stay at Phoenix House is 42 days. Sometimes it is more than that, sometimes it's less than that, but we do have an average of 42 days. So what I did to look at the trends, I just went back through our admits for the last 42 days. So I've got some numbers for you. I'm going to look at my paper so I can give you exact figures. For primary drug of choice, what we are seeing the most is marijuana. With the admits in the last 42 days, 22 of those had marijuana as their primary drug of choice. Second is methamphetamines with 9, Xanax 4, alcohol 3, Adderall 1, and K2 2. What we see as secondary coming into admissions in the last 42 days is also marijuana at 13. So with that being said, whenever I say kiddo, I use that I think that sounds nicer than client, but whenever a kiddo comes in for an assessment, a lot of times they might have more than one primary diagnosis as far as their use, depending on duration, severity, things like that. So for some of the 22 marijuana admits that they had, they could have also had a primary of methamphetamines or alcohol or K2, just whichever, you can just fill in the blank. So just because we had 22 with marijuana as their primary, it doesn't mean that was their only thing. That was the point that I wanted to make there. So some of the other drugs that we see as secondary, we do see a lot of methamphetamines. I know it doesn't sound like a lot with the numbers that I shared, but when you start looking at secondary and tertiary diagnoses, we see methamphetamines a lot. We see it very often. K2, cocaine, alcohol, and Xanax are other things that we see as secondary and tertiary diagnoses and treatment. I had already talked a little bit about, when they come in, they might have more than one. What we're seeing more often, too, is kids are starting to try a bunch of different stuff. Marijuana might typically be their preferred thing, or meth might be their preferred, it might be their drug of choice. But it's like the experimenting is really, it seems like experimenting with different stuff at parties or with friends, or when parents are out of town, we hear all kinds of different stories that the experimentation is definitely on the increase. Well, I just tried K2 because all my friends tried it. Or I decided that I would, inject heroin because my boyfriend did it, so I thought it was okay. We hear lots of things. Probably a quote that I hear on a daily basis is, "I don't do drugs, I just smoke weed." That's one of the things that I hear. I lose track of how many times I hear that. So in our treatment approaches, we really do a lot of chemical dependency education. Our treatment program is very structured, and a lot of that is mandated by our contract and our licensing with the state. But they are in groups throughout the day. If you want more specifics on that, I can answer questions about that later. But chemical dependency education is a critical component of our treatment model. We like to educate them on long-term effects of drug use, such as, it can affect your ability to have children later in life. It can cause brain damage, memory loss. There's a whole long list, and believe it or not, when you start to have these conversations with kids, they really aren't aware. It's like, well, I just wanted to get high at a party because everybody was, and then when you start to talk about the long-term physical effects and the social effects and the family effects and how it can affect your education, then they're like, oh, and they start to ask more questions. Sometimes they'll start to ask more questions. It's also really important we involve the family in our services. If there's a family that wants to be engaged while their kiddo is in treatment with us, we offer family therapy on a weekly basis. Every child in our facility has a counselor, and they have weekly individual and family sessions. Sometimes families don't engage. We do see that occasionally. But if if it was you and you had a child with us and you wanted to participate in family therapy, we do make that available. Something else that I thought I would share, because as I was pulling these numbers, what we see a lot in our assessment when we're talking to kids about, you said you were 11 years old when you smoked marijuana for the first time. Who introduced you to marijuana, or who did you smoke with the first time? The top two things that we've seen, and again, this is just from the last 42 days of assessment, so this isn't a formal study. They have access to it at school and with family members. We hear older cousins a lot, as well, my cousins were smoking, and I didn't want to think that I didn't want them to think I was trying to get them in trouble, so I just stayed there, and then I decided to smoke too, and then they like it because we also see a lot of anxiety in younger teenagers, so it helps them feel better and it helps them cope. So they like to smoke, and they see their older cousins doing it, and it's like, well, if they do it, then it's okay. It must be okay for me to do it. So that's another aspect of our treatment model, is that we take our kiddos on sober outings. And the reason we do that, it's not just to promote family support, which I've already touched on, but helping them to see that they can have fun, sober fun with peers is just really, really important. So we do different outings with them. We do cultural outings. We'll take them to the Meyerson Symphony Orchestra. And let me tell you, I have chills right now to see the look on some of the kids' faces who have literally never been anywhere and done anything like that. And they go to the Meyerson or the Texas Rangers games, and they're just like, oh, miss, this is so cool. I've never been able to do anything like this. So the cultural component is huge. We also do service-oriented outings, such as the Salvation Army there in Dallas is great to let us come and let the kids, with supervision, feed the homeless. And then educational outings. A lot of the kids in treatment, they have goals. They want to do things. They have future plans. So SMU hosted us twice over the summer for walking tours and informational tours of campus. There's also been a recent reach out from North Central Texas College, which I thought was awesome, that if we wanted to do some tours there, that we can possibly do that. So family support, but also peer support and the sober outings is huge. We don't want them to leave treatment feeling like, okay, they've told me I can have sober fun, but where do I start? So we like for them to have those skills before they leave. And how we do that, real quick, we have partnered with Gallup, and every kiddo that comes into treatment takes the Strengths Quest, and they learn their top 5 strengths. And we are rooted in positive psychology, so even the staff members, we all have taken the strengths test. So what we do with that is when they learn their top 5 strengths, we incorporate those strengths into their treatment and into their family sessions, into, like, if they want to have responsibilities in the community, we draw on their strengths to give those responsibilities. And what we encourage them to do from day one when they come out on the floor and when they do 12-step groups, they don't introduce themselves by, hi, I'm Olivia and my drug of choice is whatever. They say, hi, I'm Olivia and my top 5 strengths are empathy, relator, achiever, communicator, command, whatever their top 5 strengths are. So it immediately starts to change their identity. And with positive psychology, we do use solution-focused therapy, which draws on their strengths and resources to achieve goals. Reality therapy, making sure their 5 basic needs are met. And like I said, this is just a brief summary. And then also cognitive behavioral therapy to help them understand there is a relationship between their thoughts, behaviors, and resulting actions. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Olivia, for sharing that with us. Our next guest is Kimberly McCary. Judge Kimberly McCary is the judge of Denton County Court at Law Number 1, Denton County, sitting as a juvenile court judge. She has held this position since January 2011 after being elected in November 2010. Prior to being elected, Judge McCary was in private practice, specializing in juvenile law, and served as the presiding judge of the town of Flower Mound Municipal Court. Judge McCary was a part of the inaugural class of attorneys who were board certified in juvenile law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, and she is a member of the College of the State Bar of Texas. Judge McCary speaks frequently on issues related to juvenile law, and she is active in politics and community organizations and sits as the chairperson of the Denton County Juvenile Board. And I'm just going to add, I sit on a couple of panels with her, a couple of committees, and she is very passionate.
Okay, very good. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I usually get so nervous when I speak, and I am at such peace. And the only reason I can explain that is just to see your faces out there. We didn't know if anybody was going to come, and we're so happy to see you. And the other reason I think I'm at peace, most of us had not met before, and we met about an hour before the presentation, and it's uncanny the phrases that we use. I call my kids, I guess my clients that come to juvenile court. As a defense attorney, I call them my kids or my kiddos. Marijuana is the thing I see the most, and I think you're going to hear the same theme from us. That's not a pre-planned theme. It's just coming from right here, from our hearts. I don't have any children of my own. That ship has probably sailed. You can probably tell from my gray hair, I'm almost 50. But I feel like you kids are my kids. They're our kids. I see so much potential and ability to overcome no matter what you're going through. If you're a parent right now struggling, I see so much hope and so much ability to get through this, but it's hard. And the reason I'm focusing, even though this is a talk about, the official name is the Community Forum on Substance Abuse, I want to talk about marijuana. I hate marijuana, and I don't know how to reach young people. I don't know, as an almost 50-year-old, how to have them learn from what I say. I feel like some people have to touch it, and I need to rather than me tell them it's hot, they've got to feel it. And I've got to get through to these young people because it can be a harrowing life starting with marijuana. I hate the message that our other states are giving people. I think they're letting us down. I think it's an absolute travesty of what they're doing. It's a bad message. Why is it okay for their adults to smoke marijuana on a street corner, and I'm supposed to look at my kids in court and tell them it's not okay? So I'll do everything I can do to say how much I hate marijuana. Every time a young person comes to my court, I ask them if the attorney will allow or if they've waived their right to remain silent. I ask them about, why did you do this? And let me just say, I have jurisdiction over every single child in Denton County. There's only one juvenile court judge, so I see everything from runaway to capital murder. That's consistent. That's not an unusual situation. Marijuana breaks my heart, and it's prevalent. And I ask the young people about why did they do that? And I say things to dispel the myths that are out there. If you're a young person and you've never tried marijuana, I beg you to never, ever try it. And I beg you to tell your friends. And I see this weird phenomenon in court. The people that admit to marijuana use and had a friend that told them not to, they hold that person in such high esteem. It's almost the reverse of what you'd think. Like, oh, maybe the cool kids try marijuana. I want to try it to be cool. The cool kids tell their friends not to do it. And the young people will tell me if I'd have only listened to Sue. They really admire those people. So be brave and be that person. Don't believe Colorado, please. I'm telling you this not from what I study in the law books. I'm telling you this from talking to the young people. I've been doing this more than probably adding all these kids' age. For 20 years I've been in this system. And the young people tell me marijuana makes them lazy. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to work. So to tie that into what I'm supposed to talk about society, if you don't go to school and you don't work, that's not good for society. I don't care what they tell you in Colorado or what you want to read on the internet about marijuana, and a lot smarter people up here might have a different opinion. I don't know. I think marijuana is absolutely addictive. That's from talking to the young people. But do y'all hear that? No, it's harmless. It's at the very least habit forming. In my opinion, it's addictive. In my opinion, from talking to kids for 20 years, some of who I can't talk to anymore because they're dead. One of my kids died this week. He took his own life. So from the ones that I do talk to that are not dead, permanent, they will tell you that marijuana is absolutely a gateway drug. So do you want to believe Colorado? And do you want to believe the websites? Do you want to believe your friend? Or do you want to believe the person that is now doing meth or heroin or something risky that they tell me I would not have ever tried this had I not been under the influence of marijuana at the time? In addition, if you're especially a young lady, but you know I've had it happen to young men, if you're under the influence of marijuana, your defenses are down and people will take advantage of you in ways that I don't necessarily with this audience want to talk about specifically, but when your defenses are down, you can't protect yourself. And there are people out there preying on the idea that they're going to start you off with marijuana. So if you don't think that marijuana is a gateway, if you've read it's harmless, I'm telling you, the young people tell me absolutely not. It is a gateway. But then think about this. You don't believe me. No, it's not a gateway. Think about drug dealers. If you have drug dealer A who's selling you marijuana and drug dealer B who's selling you marijuana, and they're not stupid people. They hang out at schools, they hang out at apartment complexes, they see a cute young lady, they're going to give it to her free the first 1, 2, 3, 4 times, same with the young boy. They're not dumb people. Then you start paying for it. But there's competition among drug dealers. So I want my marijuana to be the best marijuana out there. So what am I going to do? Lace it with something that gives you that greater, wow, this is good stuff. Is that because you think he's using Miracle Grow and not like soil from his backyard? No, he put something in there, or she put something in there. So if you don't think it's a gateway on your own, the drug dealers are going to use it to get you hooked on something that's even more addictive, even more habit forming, gives you even more of a punch where you want to come back to that every day. So they're going to put stuff in there. The thing that scares me about that is if you think marijuana is harmless, maybe like a glass of wine that your mom drinks at night, if you think marijuana is harmless, I promise you meth, heroin, PCP, formaldehyde, sterilization drugs that they give to animals, to livestock, they lace it with all of these things. You could do marijuana 20 times and never die. You could do heroin one time or meth one time and die. If they're putting that in your marijuana and your brain is of that capacity where it can't handle it, your first marijuana use might be your first trip to the ER. The other thing is marijuana costs money, so you will eventually have to buy it because they're not going to keep giving it to you. And again, I'm mindful of my audience, but what is your currency? Either it's money, you're lazy because you're smoking marijuana, so you're not working, so you're stealing from the people that love you with all their heart, you're stealing from your parents. Somebody told me that today in court, and his mother's like, oh, that's where my money's going. Or what's your commodity? So I've had young people trade their personal, the cleanliness and purity of their own bodies and selves for drugs, because that's what they have to pay for. I have 2 minutes, oh my gosh. I want to tell you something else about marijuana that the experts may or may not tell you that I totally believe in. Please don't ever try marijuana, because if your brain is composed in such a way that you're predisposed, you might get schizophrenia or bipolar. I don't know what y'all think about this, but if you smoke marijuana, it can fire those bipolar and schizophrenia triggers that are in your brain, and then you suffer with that for your whole life, and your whole family suffers that with you. I'm supposed to talk about the legal consequences of it. You can tell where my heart is. It's weird, I work in the legal field, but yet my heart is not as much in the legal consequences as like the whole life-changing consequence. So if you're a young person and you have marijuana, depending on the amount, depending on the drug, I could take you away from your family until you turn 18. I have a detention facility. You can live there in somebody else's jumpsuit and underpants. We put everybody's wash into the same washing machine, and the next morning we take it out, and you get whatever underpants your co-cellmate, the guy next door, wore yesterday. That's just the way it is. You can live in a place like that until you turn 18, or possibly I could remove you to a state facility until you turn 19. I'll make you do programs, I'll make you do community service, I'll do everything I can to make you stop. If there's anything that I learn about, anything anybody's willing to try or tell me, anything to stop that. If it involves your family, I'll bring them in on it too. I can put orders in place for the parents also. Sometimes they are a contributing factor. It is an absolute big mistake for you to sit there and think, I love my child, and therefore he or she will not do drugs. So I don't like the idea that people say, well, they just have bad parents. The proof is very contradictory to that. You can love them to death if you think that that is the truth. And I know my time is up and I'm rambling at this point, so I'll turn off my mic first. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. All right, Jean Ross. Oh, no, I skipped Kathy. Oh my goodness. Sorry, Kathy. Kathy O'Keefe. On March 20th, 2010, Kathy O'Keefe lost her 18-year-old son, Brett, to an accidental drug overdose. She quickly started the nonprofit organization Winning the Fight to provide others with what was missing for her family: education, resources, and support for those dealing with addiction. She has a degree in architecture and has been in sales and marketing for 30 years. She and Ben, her husband of 26 years, raised both their boys in Flower Mound, Texas. Kathy.
I was like the whole time and I didn't go up. Thank you everybody for being here. Our son Brett was a challenge from the moment he was born, literally from the moment he was born. And he was he was challenging in that he never crawled, he bear crawled, so he was much faster than most. He was a climber, so you didn't look for your child on the ground, you looked for your child on top of refrigerators before they could walk. He used to knock down, take the screens in the house and push them out, and the neighbor would call and say, Brett's in the street, great, he's like 14 months old. And that's the kind of child he was. We never really kind of had control of him. We never really realized what that meant until we got to middle school. He was a great athlete, and he was extremely ADD. And we just kind of kept putting that off, thinking, I'll teach him, I'm ADHD, I'll teach him how to organize, and we'll get through that. And so we got to middle school, and he never did well in school. He liked art and all the fun, creative stuff, and all the reading and writing. He was like, I can't do this. Yes, you can. So when we got to middle school, things got a lot more difficult for him, and I tried to, you know what is required of you, you go do what's required. And the ADD kind of kicked in, and he asked for drugs to help him focus. So we did try some ADD meds. We didn't see a lot of change. We struggled to change drugs. We did a lot of stuff, and then we eventually kind of lost track of it. All of a sudden, they were disappearing. We don't do drugs in our house, so it was very difficult to even remember them. So we pulled them off. And again, we didn't see a lot of change, but his personality was changing. He changed his friends. He changed his clothing. And you put it off to middle school. You put it off to hormones. You put it off to everything. You're in middle school. So we kind of kept track and kind of let him go. The hair got longer. We went to a skateboard, put down the baseball bat, and went to a skateboard. And the first time we got in trouble, it was the day after school got out. And my son came in and said, Mom, Dad, get up. Brett's in the alley and the police have him. We were like, what? In between 6th and 7th grade, he got caught being in the alley smoking cigarettes. So that was his first thing that was illegal for him. And at the time, my husband was smoking cigarettes, so how do you say much? We were just kind of like, what were you thinking? You shouldn't have done that. What were you doing in the alley? That's kind of more of our concern. So we kind of went forward and moved into high school. Again, barely got out of middle school. Wasn't even quite sure if he read, but I would text him. At that point you text or read this magazine or something, and he could read, but we just kept pushing through. So when we got to high school, again, it was even more of a struggle for Brett. And I would drop him off at the back door, and about 2 hours, 3 hours later, the attendance clerk would call and go, is Brett home sick? No, I took him to school. And what he would do is he would have friends that were older, and they would go pick him up at the front door. By the time I turned around, he was already halfway down the street with his friends. So we got punished for that, for the most part. We got the truancy, we did this, we did that, but we couldn't help Brett. At one point, we thought we'd change schools, so we did. We thought we'd go into a Winfrey school, let him work at his own pace, thinking that would be a big help. Maybe he could do that. He needed the structure. That didn't work, and by then, his drug use had gotten pretty heavy, and he couldn't stay in school anymore. He was a heroin addict, and you can't go to school and you can't be a heroin addict at the same time. Because when you're a heroin addict, you wake up and you're sick, and you have to get drugs, and then you have to figure out how you're going to get the drugs, how you're going to pay for the drugs. What are you going to steal? Who are you going to rob? Let's go get the drugs. Then we go get the drugs. How are we going to get there? We go get there, we've got to use the drugs, we come home, we enjoy that high, and then we go do it all again for another time for the day. And that's basically what absorbed his life. We went to rehab, we overdosed, we went to rehab, we came out, and at the time, we didn't even get it. We didn't even understand the addiction. At the time, we were like, okay, Brett's in rehab, they're going to fix him. But we all needed fixing. It was the problem for all of us. And one of the things that I sit back now and look at, the biggest thing we missed was the mental health problem. Brett's ADD made him feel stupid. Brett's ADD had people treat him as if he was stupid. But it was his ADD that created him to self-medicate because he just wanted to be normal. So we missed the major point of his use because we thought it was a bad choice instead of self-medication. So I'm up here now telling you that if you have somebody that you care about that uses, get back and try to figure out why they're using, because healthy people don't use drugs. Healthy people stay healthy. People who use drugs for self-medication are doing it for self-medication. We need to figure out why, because that's the majority of our problems right there. We need to figure out these people are ill. Somebody held up a picture the other day to me. It was actually on Facebook, and I looked at it, and it was a picture of Lamar Odom. Is that his name? Yeah, okay. So he's in a hospital overdose right now. And then there was a picture of a military guy from our service, and he was all battled up and scarred, and they were saying, all our focus is on this, this drug addict guy, and then we have all this no focus on this serviceman. And it was really hard for me to look at because I know that even though he is doing drugs, he's still ill. And we have to look at that illness and say, you know what? He's ill. It was really hard for me. It was hard for me to look at this military guy who's hurting and look at this guy who's ill and hurting, and they were the same. So we have to look at that as being the same. Because until we stop thinking it's not going to happen to me and look at them, I'm not like them, or whatever, these kids are making bad choices, we have to sit back and say, why? Why are our kids choosing this? Why are our kids so stressed out that they're doing drugs in the first place? We had a group meeting the other day, and I said, how many people have anxiety? And I was amazed at how many people's hands went up. Why are our kids so anxious? So let's kind of sit back and slow down. Slow down. It's okay for a parent to say no without any other words. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to say but after it. No but. No. No is a complete sentence. We need to kind of take back control. We are so busy trying to be friends to our kids that we're missing out on the problems. And that's what we did. We missed his problems. We just kind of thought, Brett's just going to kind of go with the flow, because everybody in our household did that. Brett wasn't black. Brett wasn't gray. He was black and white. And we expected this child to just go with the flow and be gray. And that wasn't his boundaries that he needed, and we missed that. Therefore, I don't have a child right now. But that child did go through her court, and he was an awesome kid. And I will continue to speak for every single child. And I will continue to work with every single family until we get somewhere with this. And I'll probably die with that, but that's okay. I'm here to help people. So, winning the fight. And we have a great Facebook thing. We'll talk about that later.
Thank you, Kathy. Jean Ross. Jean is a clinical social worker, educator, and human services administrator with over 35 years of professional social work experience, both in public and private agencies. Jean began his career with Child Protective Services, where he worked at the local and statewide level in Texas. He founded a private agency in Denton County specializing in the treatment of addiction, trauma, and sexual compulsivity. Jean has also worked in the Denton ISD as a prevention specialist. Prior to returning to full-time private practice in August this year, Jean was Director of Business Development at Sante Center for Healing, a residential addiction treatment program in Argyle. He is an adjunct professor at the University of North Texas and currently serves on the advisory committee for UNT's Department of Disability and Addiction Rehabilitation. Jean received his bachelor's degree from Tarleton State University and his master's in social work from the University of Texas at Arlington.
All right, technically challenged. Thank you, Amy, and thank you all so much for coming tonight. As many of us have said, we were hoping that we would get some folks here tonight, and here you are. Thank you so much for coming. what I wanted to speak to tonight was the whole concept of prevention. That means a lot of different things when you talk about prevention. I don't know how many of you remember some of our efforts, early efforts at prevention at the community and school level. There was a program called DARE that was very well intentioned. We thought that it would be important for us to give kids some knowledge around drugs. So typically the DARE program was administered through local law enforcement agencies, and a police officer would come out to the school and they'd have this wonderful kit that had samples of drugs that they would show the kids, and they'd talk about the harmful effects of drugs. And unfortunately, it was a phenomenal failure. It did not do what we had hoped it would do. Merely presenting information to children and saying, don't do this, in some cases had the opposite effect. You tell a kid, don't do this, and what are they going to do? They're going to do it. So we've sort of evolved in our understanding and our research around prevention. And so we know a little bit more than we did back then. In a nutshell, in its basic form, what we're trying to do with prevention efforts always is to identify first what are the risk factors. And I'll talk about some of those here in a minute. What are the risk factors that contribute to the likelihood that a child is going to begin using drugs? And we want to, of course, reduce those risks or reverse those risks. On the other side of that, we know that there are a number of protective factors that we can put in place that are there that we can enhance. So any sort of prevention effort that we try to do nowadays is targeted at reducing risk factors and enhancing protective factors. For those of you that are interested in keeping up with some of the trends and keeping up with some of the treatment and intervention efforts, there's a wonderful agency, a federal agency called SAMHSA. It stands for Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, and they are the federal agency that's mandated to stay on top of mental health issues and substance use issues in our country. Every year they do a survey. The survey is called the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. The 2014 results were very timely and came out this month, so I had an opportunity to look at those, and I wanted to kind of give you just a sense of the scope, I think, of what we're talking about here. In 2014, individuals aged 12 and older in our country, there were 22.5 million people that identified as needing addiction treatment. 22.5 million people identified needing treatment services for their addiction by their own self-report. Looking at that figure, by 2020, mental health and substance use disorders will surpass all physical diseases, all other physical diseases, as a major cause of disability worldwide. That just blows me away when I think about that. We also know that addiction leads to other chronic illnesses, such as diabetes, such as heart disease. So if you look at the total costs combined, we're looking at $600 billion each year in healthcare costs because of addiction issues alone. We also know that people with a mental illness are more likely to have what we call a co-occurring substance use disorder. In fact, with adults with any mental illness 18% in 2014 had a co-occurring substance use disorder. So that's a huge factor to look at. Folks who are suffering from and dealing with a mental illness are more at risk to also have a co-occurring substance use disorder. Compare that to the rate for for folks with non-mental illness, about 6% is the rate there. So 18% versus 6%. So that's a factor in and of itself. And as Kathy pointed out, what folks who are dealing with a mental illness are about is trying to help themselves feel better, and it's not unusual for folks to turn to substance use for helping themselves feel better. So, what are we talking about again? When we talk about prevention, we're talking about mitigating the risk factors, and we're talking about enhancing the protective factors. The overarching thing we're trying to do with any prevention effort is to prevent that first use. We know from the research that if we can delay that young person from trying the drug for the first time, the better chances are that that first use won't progress into a complete full-blown addiction disorder. So anytime we can delay that initiation of that first use, that's what we're trying to do with our prevention efforts. And when we talk about prevention, we're talking about it along several domains. We're talking about at the individual level, we're talking about at the family level, we're talking about at the peer level, the school level, and the societal level. Judge McCary talked about her disgust with marijuana. We've seen a rise in the last few years in marijuana use among adolescents now, and that can be directly correlated with the mixed message that we're sending kids about the harmful effects of marijuana. When states legalize marijuana and when we call it medical marijuana, we're confusing children even further, and they simply think we don't know what we're talking about. So, for one of the big areas in prevention is helping children understand that there are harmful effects. That whole notion that it's not harmful, again, is something that kids normally think. With DARE, for example, kids would look around and they knew their friends were smoking pot, but we told kids that it wasn't harmful. And they look at their friends who may be making A's, and they see, that's not true. So it's the perception of harm that I think we've got to help folks and help kids understand. When we talk about risk factors very quickly, there are a number of risk factors. Certainly, there are biological and psychiatric predispositions to addiction. As I said, we know that there's a perception of low risk oftentimes for children when they choose to use. Availability is another area that increases the likelihood. We live in Denton now, where there are 2 universities. The availability of drugs in our community is very easy to access. Other risk factors would include aggressive behavior, poor self-control, poor social skills, academic difficulties, poor commitment to sobriety. So those are just a handful of risk factors that are important for us to be aware of. Some of the protective factors that we talk about are bonded families where parents are educated around drugs, and they are also educated around how to monitor their children. We also know that it's very important, and now I'm just talking about on the family level here now, as far as protective factors, but we also know that family discussions, moderate, consistent discipline is also important. And then on the community level, coalitions can be extremely important for communities. And here in Denton County, we have the Denton County Citizens Committee that was started by United Way that is looking at filling the gaps here in Denton County for mental health and substance use treatment. Texas dropped to 50th in the country for mental health spending here a few years ago. Denton County happens to be almost dead last in Texas for per capita spending on mental health and substance use services. So here we are in Denton, sitting at ground zero for state spending on mental health. That's one of my soapboxes, if you will. So on the community level, we're facing that dilemma, and we're trying to do something about it. Here in Denton ISD, there are student assistance counselors at all of the secondary schools whose job it is to, I'm getting this signal, but real quickly, substance use address prevention efforts at the secondary level, and then we have also 2 student assistance counselors in 2 of our elementary schools here. So the school district is also looking at how we can do prevention here in Denton. I'll shut up now. Thank y'all very much.
She really did not do this. She was doing this.
All right, at this time, if you have any questions that you've written down, we'll come around and collect those so that we can ask the panel. And I'm going to turn it over to Ann Skaggs. She's going to be our moderator who's going to ask those questions. So we'll come and collect those.
Okay, am I going to dance while we're doing it?
Yeah.
I'm not a dancer. I could sing, but I don't know any songs that would be appropriate. So, yeah. No, I mean like for the topic. Okay, this one is for Olivia. What is K2 and what are the dangers of K2?
Oh, yeah.
K2 is a synthetic form of marijuana, and I think and they might be able to contribute as well, I'm sure, but I think what's the scariest about K2 is that it looks just like regular marijuana. It's very scary. Do y'all want to add anything to that? It's a synthetic form.
It can trigger schizophrenic episodes. It can trigger psychotic episodes. When we have folks coming into treatment who've been doing that for any period of time, they can't do treatment until they've stabilized in a psychiatric hospital. So it's extremely toxic, and it is also varies from each packet, each batch. Thank you. It's not controlled.
Yeah.
So
it almost always requires detox before a kiddo can enter treatment for health reasons. We do have a nurse on staff, we have a psychiatrist, but we don't have a medical doctor who can be there to monitor the needs. And it's one of those, as the judge mentioned, it can take one time. We have a kiddo in our facility right now. She tried it once, and I will not go into what all happened to her for the sake of some smaller ones that we have here, but it's extremely serious.
And something to think about is, first of all, most of it's coming in from China right now, and they're spraying what's a tea leaf with chemicals. We don't know what the chemicals are, but what's sad about it is when there's an adverse reaction, a child ends up or somebody ends up in the ER, they can't test for it. So they test and there's nothing there, and then they have to do another test. So as they're going through this plethora of tests, they're still not getting any answers, but yet the kidneys are shutting down, and they're literally watching their people die in the ER because we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is.
I would just caution you, don't feel educated that you now know what it is, because the problem is we make it illegal, they'll just come up with something else. So the conversation has to always continue with your child, because pretty much if you tell them not to use K2, they're going to be thinking, that was so yesterday. So you got to keep up on the conversation, not just the fancy terms for today's name.
The good news is we have seen a decline in its use. It spiked past the use of marijuana there for a while, which was very scary.
All right, this one is for Ryan. Why do you think your rehab experience and successful sobriety worked for you?
That's a difficult one. I mean, for me, I have a lot of friends that did rehab multiple times, up to like 7 visits, and they still haven't gotten anything out of it. But I think for me, a lot of it was a lot of family support. That's pretty much the biggest part of it. My family was really supportive, and I was able to meet a lot of people in the rehab and be able to talk to my family, and I was able to experience and feel a lot of love and acceptance. And I started, I went into rehab planning to leave and still do drugs. But after I started experiencing, like my real self and, seeing really how much people do appreciate me and how much I matter, especially for my family, which that was really all I ever wanted. And so I got a glimpse of that, and, it was hard still. Even leaving rehab, it took me a while to make the decision to go to sober living, but really I knew this is what was right for me, and I wanted to continue to grow and have meaningful relationships in my life. So that's really what it was about for me.
Kathy, what would you have done differently? At what point would you have stepped in?
I would have done so many things different.
The first thing that, we get to sit back and evaluate it now. The first thing I would have done was, Brett was a very creative person that was not a typical student that regurgitated his education. We have another child that does that quite well. It didn't mean that Brett was stupid. It just meant that he learned differently. We should have embraced that rather than try to force him into a school district that didn't give it to him, didn't give him that opportunity. We should have taken care of the mental health. We should pay more attention to that. We should have given him stronger boundaries rather than be the gray family that we, kind of like, oh, just go with it, honey. We should have said no and stuck to our grounds, because it was kind of like, my husband, we kind of laugh about that now. Don't make me get up. Don't make me get up. And it's like, just get up. Just beat him, But not that I mean that, but seriously, it's kind of like there were so many empty threats, so we never really had consequences because they were all over the board. We needed to lay down rules and stick by those rules. Those were some of the things. And we had a child that was not Brett, too. And that's a challenge. And at least with that regards, we knew it wasn't we knew it was more of Brett rather than us as well, because Kyle was able to conform, and he did fine. Brett just couldn't do that. And it went on and on. So we did a lot of bad stuff, but I share that so other people learn from it.
Olivia, how many kiddos do drugs that's not weed?
How many kiddos do that besides marijuana? We see a lot. In fact, I feel pretty familiar with the information that I have because I went back through all of their assessments and intake drug history. I think only 2 of the kids that I looked at had just marijuana. It's literally, like I had mentioned, it's 3 things, it's 4 things. And again, it comes into play with what the severity and duration of use is. But and just to tag with that, the one of them that I know for sure in our treatment program who's there for, quote, just marijuana, she had talked about already being offered other things. And the females in the community have all told her, who marijuana was very much a gateway drug for them, they have all told her that, this is your chance. You've only done marijuana, so you can learn from this before it escalated into something else. So yes, at this time, just 2. All the rest have at least 2 or 3 or more substances that they're using when they checked into treatment.
Can I piggyback on that?
Marijuana is by far a gateway drug. We all know that. There's no question about that. But we can't turn our backs on our prescription drugs that are sitting in our cabinets, because it is very easy for a child to walk in, grab a drug, take a couple of them, not even knowing what they're for. It's easy to look and say, oh, take 3, every 3 hours for pain is needed. So they grab it, they take it, it doesn't smell, they don't have to buy it, it's right there available, it's gone, they don't get caught with it, there's no paraphernalia, there's nothing else. Lock up your drugs. And when I say lock up drugs, what is a drug? A drug is anything that has a dose on it. So if you have aspirin, if you have Benadryl, if you have pet medications, they need to be locked up. We have a girl that has overdosed 3 times on Benadryl, purposely. Well, she didn't purposely overdose, but she purposely took a lot of Benadryl. Cough syrup, we're coming into cold season. Cough and flu, all of that stuff, if it's got a dose on it, it could be abused. And if somebody wants to abuse it, they will abuse it.
Okay, this is for Ryan and Kathy. So, yeah, keep saying. What's the single most important thing a parent can do to reach out to their child and recognize if their child is one who looks to have everything together but is struggling emotionally and internally?
Wow. Ooh, that's a hard one. Ryan might even be better than this because we missed it. I mean, life becomes status quo when you're living with somebody. You just kind of expect it. So it's like gaining weight. Your family's the last to notice it because they see you every day, and they don't see you putting on your pants. It's very difficult. It's difficult to identify the mental health issues, listen to your kids. If a child, and we have kids that stomach aches, don't want to go to school. I mean, we never really had that with Brett, but he would come home, he hated school. Why is that? I mean, people maybe you don't like school, but you like to learn. Why did he hate that? So that should have been something that we should have picked up on, but we didn't. And like I said before, we kind of ignored some of the other mental health issues, thinking he could grow out of it and didn't need a controlled substance to help him get through it. Ryan's probably better at this.
I'll just say on the way over to the expert, what I see when I talk to the families is, I want to tell every kid that comes to court that day, you're the most special person I saw today, and say it to the very next kid. But sometimes the parent, and I am not about blame, but sometimes the parents are missing that too. That is the most special kid in the universe, and time and communication, because the faces of the parents go like this when the kid says some of the stuff that they'll say to an absolute complete stranger because I asked. And if the parents had just asked, I feel confident that they would say what's going on in their broken little hearts and help to talk about that.
That's a really good question. I'm a very good example of it. I'd say the biggest thing is, when we get so wrapped up with the status quo and, what to do, what not to do, you need this knowledge, you need to grow up and do this, and I just feel like kids their humanity isn't recognized today anymore. We don't feel recognized for who we are. And for me, the reason I stayed clean was because of love, and I felt important, and I felt connection for the first time. And now when I go to meetings or I'm at my house, I feel like I belong with them. And I think with how society is today and how many kids there are and the growth that's happening in technology, we're talking about third graders being on their cell phones in third grade. We're losing touch with who we are, and we're humans, and we're all in this together. And we're not learning how to communicate anymore. We're not learning how to express our emotions. We're not learning how to express ourselves and be okay with ourselves. And that's why, when that's not expressed, I'm basically saying, show your child that, we're in this together, the love that you have for each other, and that, these adults and the teachers and the people, way up there in society, they may have a lot of knowledge, but at the same time, they're human just like you. And just because you're in 6th grade and you can't do algebra at the moment doesn't mean you're less important or something's wrong with you. Because you have ADD and you learn differently doesn't mean you're any different than all of us. We're all here and we all love each other, and that's what kids aren't feeling today. At least that's not what I felt. So.
Okay, Ryan, one more for you. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to parents who just found out their child is using marijuana? And then there's a second part to this. Was marijuana a gateway drug for you? Why or why not?
I'll answer the second part first. Yeah, absolutely. Marijuana was a gateway drug. I used to hate that. I used to hate when teachers would talk about how bad marijuana is, or they would try to tell us that, or that it's a gateway drug, and be like, no, it's not. But every single person that I used with, every single person I grew up with, everyone started smoking weed first. Everyone. I started smoking weed before I even drank alcohol or did any other drug. It was always from weed. And I'm sure there's a lot of kids in schools who would hate me for saying this right now, but it is so true. It is a gateway drug, and it is addictive because it takes you out of touch with reality, and that's what everyone's wanting. For finding out that your kid is starting to smoke marijuana, I don't know. That's really hard. I'd definitely say, I'm not a parent at all, but I think the first thing we want to do is, scold them or be like, no, why are you doing this? Bad, whatever that entails, grounding them, I don't know what it is. And that does the opposite effect. It's like telling kids why drugs are bad. You shouldn't do this. That makes me want to do it more. I'm already unhappy with life and unhappy with myself, and I can't say anything about it. And then you're going to ground me? Well, that just made it worse. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And that's really hard for us. I could see being a parent that it'd be really hard to not get upset with them. But the thing is, it really goes back to touching on their humanity and being like, more like asking them, why do you feel like you need to do this? Really try to understand that. Really try to understand who they are and why they're doing it. And they may not be used to that. If someone were to ask me that, I'd be like, go away, you don't know anything about me and I don't want you to. So it's really, why do you do this? Why do you feel like you need to do this? It's okay that you have tried it. It is all okay. You're still my child and I love you, and I just want you to be yourself, and I want to be happy together, and I want you to be able to do this without feeling like you need to go behind my back or that you need to get high about it, because that's not the answer. Maybe we can go see a movie next weekend or something. What do you want to do? Do you want to join the soccer team or something? All kinds of stuff. And that's probably hard at first. I didn't want to, I mean, I grew up and I started doing that because I didn't want to have anything to do with my parents because I didn't feel like they wanted to have anything to do with me. But I think it's a radical change in how we view our children and, you know, how we relate to them and how we see them and how we interact. I mean, that's really where it all starts. When I started injecting heroin or started doing all these chemicals that I don't even know the name for, but I knew how bad it was for me. I knew I was already unhealthy. I already knew I was failing school when I used to get straight A's. I knew how bad it was for me, but it was how I lived. It was how I dealt with the reality that I don't feel loved and that I don't feel like I belong here. It really wasn't until 3 months ago or 4 months ago that someone told me, yeah, Ryan, like, that's normal because you're a human being. And I was like, what? I'm human? Like, it was amazing for me. I was like, wow, like, I'm just like everyone else. And yeah, that's what we all want. That's what we all want to feel.
Can I jump on that? From a parent standpoint, if, you know, because this comes up to me a lot.
Where, you know, I just found out my kid was smoking pot. What do I do? Don't freak out. That's what you do. You don't freak out. You make sure that your child knows that you care about them and that you love them and that it's unhealthy. The next thing you do is you go get a drug test and you set a family drug policy in your house. You let them know that I love you enough. These are the rules. We do not allow drugs or alcohol in our house. You set a policy so that everybody in the house knows what that policy is. And then you adhere to that with the correct consequences. There's actually, on the back table there is a page of family drug policy. You know, make it work for you, but you can't allow a child, you know, and in our case it was bad because it was kind of like, well, we smoked pot when we were kids. First of all, it's not even the same pot. I mean, this is chemical and the hydro and words I've never even heard of. The stuff we had grew on the side of the road and it's just different, and we can't expect our drugs to be the same. But set your policies. Families need to determine what exactly they're going to do and keep to those grounds. And keep this in mind too. Drug companies spend a lot of money to get their drugs in our hands. Drug dealers spend a lot of money to get their drugs in our hands. We need to spend a lot of time to keep them out of our kids' hands. We have to be vigilant about this. We have to be smart about it. We have to educate. That's how we're going to do this.
The only thing I would add to that is I definitely agree with the boundaries and consequences. In court, I'm all about consequences, and I'm all about telling them it's going to get worse. If you keep doing the same thing, don't expect me to do the same thing. And I think all of those things are extremely important, but what are you going to fill it with? Like I said, I've been doing this 20 years. I can't tell you 5 bad kids in the whole time I've been doing this. So they're not doing drugs because they're bad kids. I would be hard-pressed to come up with 5 bad kids. So if it's not because they're bad, what is it because of? And so even if you say, we're not doing drugs in this house, we're going to drug test every Wednesday, what are you going to fill that with? Find out the why behind the behavior. I think that's key, because how are you going to fill that void if you just tell them you're going to stop this? We don't want unhappy kids.
So we don't have any other questions, but we do have a few more minutes if any of you would like to share any closing comments for our audience.
I was just going to say one thing I'd written in my notes here, and then I forgot to say it. We do see a lot of kids reporting anxiety and high levels of stress. And so when we talk to them about, you know, where did you get Xanax, or where did you get Valium or Klonopin or Ativan, it's out of their parents' medicine cabinets, where it's, you know, it's not locked up, it's not seen as a danger. And so I had highlighted those as just things that's in our medicine cabinets that we as adults might not take very seriously, but what we see in our assessments that is probably on, I know of what I looked at to do this, I would say on probably half of those admits, Xanax was somewhere on the list. So Just be aware, yeah, or Valium.
Oh, Walgreens.
Yeah.
Which you can buy at Walgreens.
He said, what is the most dangerous drug?
The most abused and overdosed drug is alcohol. That is the number one overdosed substance is alcohol. And the reason we're seeing a huge amount of death because of drugs is because of mixed drug intoxication. So you're seeing a lot of Xanax and alcohol. And here's some stats. Every 14 minutes, somebody dies from a drug overdose. Every 14 minutes. Every 19 minutes, somebody dies from a prescription drug overdose. And every 3 minutes, a woman shows up in an ER with an overdose. And most of that is Xanax and alcohol.
I would just like to leave everyone here tonight with the notion that you are not in this alone. I think when I was talking about prevention a minute ago, this is not just a family issue. This is a community issue. This is a society issue. This stretches way beyond what we as parents often have control over. So I guess my take-home message for everyone here tonight is don't hesitate to ask for help yourselves with this. You're not in this alone. There are many people here in this community that you can reach out to and ask for help. And then one other thing that, as Kathy was talking, we didn't touch on tonight that I think is extremely important, and that's just the whole issue of alcohol use. We haven't talked much about that. That's huge. Tobacco use is another, that is a terminal addiction, tobacco use. And so don't just think that this is a drug problem. We're talking about alcohol and tobacco as serious issues too for our children.
All right, I would like to thank our panel again for being here tonight. And then I would also like to congratulate all of you for being here, because Jean talked about those prevention measures that you can put into place. You participated in one of those prevention measures tonight. So congratulations for taking that step and having the courage to come and learn more about this very serious issue that we have in our community. Thank you for being here. These guys are going to be around for a few more minutes if you have any questions, and have a good evening.